Hey guys, Barrett here. Welcome back to another video. Today, I'm going to give you 6 general mindset or preparation tips for the 2020 tournament season. Let's do this. All right, it is officially tournament season. Now, who knows when tournament season really begins, but it's that time of the year where the warm weather is coming and people are getting outdoors and playing more and practicing more and participating in tournaments. So I thought I would share with you just 6 things that I've learned over the past 3 years playing pickleball, playing competitive pickleball, that will really help if you're playing in a tournament or maybe just a serious match or a match where you think that you're going to be challenged to an extreme degree. So the first one that I'd like to talk about is understanding that whatever is happening to you is also happening to them. This is something that can really trick people up. And it's important to understand that if there's an environmental factor such as wind or the court is a little bit different than what you're used to, whatever you're experiencing, they're also probably experiencing as well. And that includes mental stuff. Like if you're anxious, right? Maybe it's your first tournament and you're really nervous, which I was, by the way, totally nervous. I was a nervous wreck. They're probably feeling a little bit nervous too. Yeah, it's very common. It's a very common thing, and you can't really tell. Sometimes people are really good at hiding their emotions. And so sometimes you can't tell, but really, in reality, the vast majority of people who go to pickleball tournaments, especially the big ones, they're going to be a little bit anxious. So always keep that in mind. Whatever you're feeling and whatever is bothering you, like the wind or the anxiety or whatever, it's probably happening to them as well. One of the most important things when it comes to tournament success is to find the weaknesses of your opponents that you can exploit that. Well, one of the ways you can do that is to actually practice empathy. Now, I know that sounds so weird, right? You're thinking like, wait, why? Why do you need to practice empathy? That doesn't make sense. Well, empathy isn't necessarily benevolent on a baseline. Empathy just means that you can understand something from another person's perspective. It's a brain thing. And so when it comes to empathy on the court, if you see someone mess up a shot, like an opponent mess up a shot, if you've got empathy, you can say to yourself, oh boy, I know what that's like, right? It's not necessarily benevolent, but since you saw the mistake and you noticed the weakness, if you have empathy, then you can begin to really understand what that's like from your opponent's perspective so that you can then begin to exploit that weakness. Now, I know that sounds kind of bad, doesn't it? But that's how it works. If you can understand something from another person's perspective, you're going to know how to exploit that weakness to a greater degree, which will give you an advantage on the court. Now, similar to that, the last thing you want to do as tip number 3 here is to give away your own weaknesses. The best way to give away your own weaknesses is to let out emotional outbursts when you make a mistake. This is something I tell people all the time. Try not to engage in emotional outbursts, especially if you're playing against a team that you don't know. Because let's say, as an example, you do something like, you get caught up. Let's say you get a volley to your shoulder here, and you get caught up with like the chicken wing thing. And you go, oh, not this again. Or something like that. Well, guess what? You just gave them information, right? Now they know, hey, one little point we can do here is we can aim for that player's shoulder. They just had a little outburst there. So this is why if you see me play in a tournament, I'm typically quite stoic. I am very calm, try to be cool as a cucumber because the last thing I want to give them are my weaknesses, my errors, and so on. Now, the interesting thing about pickleball tournaments, or just pickleball in general, is that it's played in so many different types of environments and courts. And it could be a permanent pickleball court. It could be a tennis court that's lined. You could have permanent nets. You could have portable nets. There's so many different things that could go on, different weather environments, wind, and so on. So if you're going into a big tournament or like a competitive match, it's really important to scout out the location first before you play. It's important to know what the weather is going to be like. What's the wind going to be like? How are the courts going to be organized? Are they going to be on tennis courts? Is it going to be a pickleball court that's jammed in the corner of a tennis court where they have like those corners that aren't a 90-degree angle, they kind of come at a 45-degree angle, so it makes that corner really snug? These are the things that you have to know before you play. And so if, let's say, as an example, you're at a tournament and you're about to get called, let's say they call your court number, it's like 22 or something, you go over to the court, don't just sit there casually and wait for people to get there. Walk around the court, analyze everything, look at the lines, get your eyes used to the way the net looks and the way the lines look and all that sort of stuff. You want to analyze the situation you're going to be in so that you're more comfortable. The more comfortable you are, the more naturally you're going to play, which means you're just going to play better. Another really cool thing about pickleball tournaments is you get to meet so many different types of people. But when you meet different types of people you've never met before, you're probably going to meet some pickleball styles you've never met before. And sometimes that can make you lose a match. So if you're in the first game of a match, sometimes it can be useful to do what I call poke and prod, which just means that you try out different things over the course of a couple of points to try to figure out where the strengths and the weaknesses are. So maybe for the first point, you say you're serving, you try a third shot drop. Just notice what happens. Notice what happens when you do a third shot drop to their backhand. Did they handle it well? Then next point, try a drive. Did they handle that well? And try to build up like a bank of information as the game goes on so that when you get into that second game, whether or not you won or lost, you can have a really clear-cut strategy in terms of what you need to do. It can be quite difficult when you play against a team that you've never played against, especially if they, maybe they're like volleyball players or something and they have like a completely different style of play. So poking and prodding and trying out things during that first game can give you a unique advantage that you can use to get your name moving to the right. Boy, this is a big one, number 6. It's something that we've talked about many times on the podcast, and this has to do more with sort of the mental game side of things, kind of the mindset stuff, and that is to decrease technique thinking, but increase strategic thinking. Now, I come from golf. I've played golf since I was 10 years old. And one of the things that we used to say a lot when we're playing golf, and especially if we're in a tournament, is to never have swing thoughts. So if you're on the range and you're hitting some balls, typically what you're saying to yourself on the range is, oh, that was a little slicey. I need to come through a little bit more and turn my wrists over or whatever. There could be many, many different swing thoughts that are going on. But in a tournament, or if you're out playing, and let's say you're doing pretty well, that's the last thing you want to do. You don't want to engage your conscious mind into your swing and do things purposefully, because your unconscious mind is so much more powerful, and it's going to take care of that stuff for you. So the last thing you want to do is be trying new things in the middle of a tournament match, right? But also trying to adjust things. Like, it's just not going to work. And so, however, what you can do to replace that kind of thinking, if you're a thinking kind of person during a match, is to replace it with strategic and tactics thinking. That's going to be way more productive. There's nothing wrong with changing the way that you play strategically. In fact, it's really actually required. And it's a much better solution than just changing the way that you hit the ball. There are so many times during a match where you have to change your strategy, the tactics that you're using, and so on. And so it's important to always be aware of what's going on the court, what's going on in the game, and make those changes before you lose. Okay, guys, so those are 6 mindset and preparation tips that you can use before the big day, whether or not that's a competitive private match or a tournament match of some kind. I hope that it's useful for you guys. I hope that it's helpful. Feel free to go over to pickleballkitchen.com. Got a bunch of really cool stuff on there. Got the podcast, articles, all that sort of stuff. Thank you guys so much for joining me in this video. And as usual, I'll see you next time.